Imagine waking up without an alarm. No phone buzzing, no notifications, no schedule pulling you out of sleep before your body's ready. Just the slow, natural return of consciousness, pulled back gently by morning light and the sounds of a city already coming alive outside your window. You open your eyes. Above you is a ceiling of fired brick. Smooth, precise, every brick the exact same size as the one beside it. The walls around you are the same. Clean lines, careful construction. There is a small window positioned deliberately to catch the morning breeze and keep out the worst of the midday heat. Someone thought about that when they built this house. Someone planned it. Outside, the city is waking up. You can hear it before you see it. The low rumble of cartwheels on a paved stone road. Voices calling to each other in a language no living person can understand anymore. And water, always water, running quietly beneath the street in a channel of fitted brick, carrying waste away from the city with invisible efficiency. Somewhere nearby, bread is baking. The smell drifts through your window and mixes with the scent of the river and the warmth of animals being led to market. You are in Mohenjo-daro, and the year is 2500 BC. Here is what most people know about the ancient world. They know Egypt, the pyramids, the pharaohs, the golden mask of Tutankhamun. They know Mesopotamia, Babylon, the first written laws, the Epic of Gilgamesh. They know Greece and Rome. But here is what almost nobody learns in school. While all of that was happening in the West, over here, in the river valleys of what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, a civilization of more than 5 million people was already building planned cities. Cities with straight roads on a grid. Cities with public buildings, workshops and marketplaces. Cities where every house, rich or poor, had a bathroom with a drain connected to a city-wide sewer system. 5 million people. Larger than Egypt, more geographically spread out than Mesopotamia, and in certain ways that still astonish archaeologists today, more sophisticated than either. And then they vanished, and were forgotten so completely that for 3,500 years nobody knew they had ever existed. Until 1920, when a British archaeologist noticed unusually well-made ancient bricks being used as ballast in a railway construction project in Pakistan, and started to dig, a civilization hiding under the earth, waiting to be found. Now here is where it gets strange. Archaeologists have excavated dozens of Indus Valley sites. They have catalogued hundreds of thousands of artifacts, pottery, tools, jewellery, toys, seeds, bones, everything. And in all of that, across all of those ruins spanning hundreds of years, they found almost no weapons of war, no depictions of battles or conquest, no mass graves, no monuments built to celebrate the glory of a single ruler, no clear evidence of kings at all. The largest buildings in your city are a great public bath and what appears to be a granary, a place to store food for the community, public infrastructure, not personal power. And then there is the writing, a real script, over 400 symbols found on thousands of carved seals across dozens of sites, a functioning written language used by millions of people across centuries, and no living person can read a single word of it. Not one symbol has been definitively decoded. Their language died so completely that we cannot even identify what language family it belonged to. We know what they ate for breakfast. We know the exact ratio of their bricks. We know the routes their merchants travelled to trade with Mesopotamia. But we do not know what they called themselves. We do not know the name of a single person who ever lived there. They are the most sophisticated civilization you have probably never thought about, and they are almost entirely silent. So here is the question that pulls at anyone who learns about this place. What was it actually like to live there? Not the grand historical sweep, not the academic debate, just What did you smell when you walked out your front door in the morning? What did the market sound like? What happened in the long afternoon hours when the heat settled over the city like a weight? What did the evening feel like when the day was finally done and the bread was baked and the children were tired and the city quieted down to its nighttime sounds? What did it feel like to be alive in one of the most organized, most peaceful, most mysteriously erased civilizations in all of human history? That is what we're going to explore tonight, slowly, chapter by chapter. One ordinary day in a city that the world forgot. If you are listening to fall asleep, you are in exactly the right place. Let the day ahead of you go. There is nothing you need to do right now except follow this story back 5,000 years to a city of brick and river water and bread baking in the early morning air. Before we go deeper, tell me where in the world you're listening from right now and what time is it there. I'd love to check the comments. The city is waiting. Let's go in. You step outside your front door and the city is already alive. The street in front of you is straight. Not approximately straight. Geometrically, deliberately, precisely straight. Running north to south the way every major street in the city runs. The road surface is paved with fitted brick, worn smooth in the centre from years of cartwheels and bare feet. On either side, just below street level, covered drainage channels carry last night's wastewater silently away from the neighbourhood, out of sight, out of smell, already gone. You have lived here your whole life and you have never once thought about how remarkable this is. But it is remarkable. In 2500 BC, most of the world's cities are open ditches and mud roads and the permanent smell of things that should have been taken away but weren't. Here, the streets drain cleanly when it rains. Here, the waste disappears before it becomes a problem. Someone designed this city the way an engineer designs a system, not just building houses, but thinking about what happens after the houses are full of people. That someone lived and died thousands of years ago and left no name behind. But every morning when you walk out your front door, you are walking on their work. The morning soundscape builds around you as you move down the street. Cartwheels on brick. A merchant 2 blocks over calling out to someone across the road. The particular heavy sound of a grain storage jar being moved across a stone floor. Animals, cattle, goats, the occasional dog, adding their voices to the general conversation of the city waking up. And underneath all of it, water, always water, running through the channels beneath your feet, being drawn from the well at the corner of your neighbourhood, being poured into clay vessels in a dozen kitchens along your street. In Mohenjo-daro, water is not something you worry about. Every neighbourhood in this city has its own well. Archaeologists excavating these ruins thousands of years from now will count hundreds of them. More wells per person than almost any ancient city ever studied. Nobody here walks far for clean water. Nobody fights over access to it. The wells are simply there, the way the streets are there, the way the drainage channels are there. Infrastructure so well thought out that it fades into the background of daily life. Think about that for a moment. Clean water, available to everyone in every neighbourhood in 2500 BC. Rome's famous aqueducts come 1,000 years later. Medieval European cities will have open sewage running through their streets for centuries. And here you are, stepping around the corner to draw clean water from a public well before most of the ancient world has figured out that this is something worth building. You fill your vessel and head back inside. Your house is 2 stories of fired brick, not mud brick, fired brick, kiln-hardened, built to survive the monsoon rains season after season without softening or crumbling. The walls are thick enough to hold the cool of the night well into the morning. Your window is small and positioned deliberately away from the prevailing wind so the breeze enters but the dust stays out. The flat roof above you serves as a terrace, a functional space for drying food, sleeping in the hottest months, and on mornings like this one, simply standing and looking out over the city before the day fully arrives. You go up, From the rooftop, Mohenjo-daro spreads out in every direction in the early light. The straight lines of the streets, the uniform height of the brick houses stretching to the edge of the lower city. To your left, the elevated citadel mound rises above everything else, and at its highest point the great bath catches the first real light of the morning, its wet brick surface glowing faintly gold. And beyond the city, in every direction, the flat green of the floodplain, the glint of the Indus River in the distance, the enormous sky opening up over all of it, pink and gold and the specific deep blue that only exists in the minutes just before the sun clears the horizon. Your child comes up behind you and leans against your side, still half asleep, hair uncombed, pointing at something on the street below. A merchant setting up his stall. You watch together without saying anything. There is nothing that needs to be said. Before the day's work begins, there is the great bath. You go most mornings. Many people do. The walk takes you through the heart of the upper city, past the granary where the community's grain reserves are stored, up the broad steps of the citadel mound, and into the colonnaded complex that surrounds the pool. The bath itself is large, 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, with steps leading down into the water from both ends. The floor and walls are sealed with a layer of natural tar applied so carefully that the structure holds water the way a modern pool holds water. Clean, contained, maintained. Why do you come here? This is the question that archaeologists will ask for 100 years without agreeing on an answer. There are no inscriptions explaining the Great Bath's purpose, no images showing it in use. What is clear is that it was important, central to something that mattered deeply to this city. The most likely interpretation is ritual purification. Coming to the water before the day begins as an act of spiritual preparation, a way of arriving at the day clean in a sense that goes beyond the physical. You do not stand at the edge of the pool analysing your own motivations. You come because you have always come, because your mother brought you here when you were small, because something about this place in the early morning, the cool water, the colonnaded walkways, the sound of the city muffled and distant, settles something in you that the rest of the day will spend unsettling again. You stay longer than you need to. The modern person listening to this right now, lying in a dark room somewhere in the world, they know this feeling. The long shower before a hard day, the few quiet minutes before the phone comes back on, the deliberate pause before the noise starts again, the instinct to approach the day from a place of stillness rather than being swallowed by it the moment your eyes open. That instinct is not new. It is not a modern luxury or a wellness trend. It is old, older than history, older than writing. Here it is, in 2500 BC, built in fired brick at the centre of the most organised city on earth. Back home, the household is fully awake. You comb your hair with a fine-toothed ivory comb. Archaeologists will find combs exactly like this one in the ruins of your city, thousands of years from now, and recognise them immediately because they are almost identical to combs still being made today. You clean your teeth with a ground paste that leaves your mouth sharp and clear. You check yourself briefly in a small bronze mirror, polished smooth enough to show a reflection. The children are loud now. They're always loud by this point in the morning, fully committed to the day in the way that only children can be. Bodies and voices completely available to whatever comes next. Your household includes your children, likely an older relative or two, perhaps a sibling's family sharing the upper floor. The extended family unit is the basic structure of life here. You are rarely alone in this house. On most mornings you would not want to be. Outside, the street is filling up. The market is waking. The city that has been doing this every single day for longer than anyone alive can remember is doing it again. The same streets, the same wells, the same great bath at the top of the citadel mound. The same morning light finding the same brick walls and making them glow for a few minutes before the sun rises fully and the real heat of the day begins. You eat something small. You drink water from the vessel you filled an hour ago, and then you go out into it. If you are drifting off right now, let yourself go. The morning will keep. The streets of Mohenjo-daro have been here for 4,000 years. They are not going anywhere. Rest now. The market will be waiting when you come back. The smell hits you before you reach the market. Roasting grain, fresh flatbread pulling away from a hot clay surface, sesame oil warming in a shallow pan, the particular sweetness of dates piled in a wooden bowl just beginning to soften in the morning heat. You've smelled this combination your entire life, and it still does something to your stomach. That immediate involuntary response that tells you food is close and your body wants it. You're hungry. You've been awake for over an hour. Time to eat. First, though, home. Your kitchen is a small room at the back of the house, built around a clay stove that sits low to the ground, vented carefully so the smoke finds its way out rather than filling the room. On the stone grinding platform beside it, someone, likely the older woman in your household, the one who's been doing this longer than anyone, is already working. 2 stones, 1 flat, 1 rounded, and a small pile of wheat grain between them. The motion is practiced, automatic, almost meditative. Grain goes in, flour comes out, and the quiet rhythmic sound of stone on stone has been the first sound of morning in this kitchen for as long as you can remember. Archaeologists will find these grinding stones in the ruins of nearly every Indus Valley home they excavate. They will find the clay stoves, the storage jars, the residue of a dozen different foods baked into the walls of cooking vessels. And from all of that physical evidence, the seeds, the bones, the burned remnants, the chemical traces left behind in pottery, they will piece together a picture of what you actually eat. The answer is a great deal more than most people would guess. Wheat and barley are the foundations, ground into flour, mixed with water, flattened and cooked on the hot clay surface of the stove into flatbread that comes off slightly charred at the edges and still warm in the centre. You eat a piece of it now, standing in the kitchen, tearing off sections, and eating them with a handful of lentils that have been sitting in a clay pot since last night, slow cooked with mustard seed and a little sesame oil until they are soft and deeply savoury. This is an ordinary breakfast, nothing special about it. But consider what is on your table: wheat, barley, lentils, sesame, mustard, rice when the season is right, dates, mangoes, chickpeas. The Indus Valley sits in one of the most agriculturally productive river systems on Earth, and the people who have been farming it for generations have learned to work it thoroughly. You keep cattle and buffalo for milk and for labour, sheep and goats for meat and wool, pigs and chickens, both of which appear frequently in the animal bone record at excavation sites. And then there is the river. The Indus River runs just beyond the edge of the city, and it is full of fish. Archaeologists excavating Mohenjo-daro find fish bones in extraordinary quantities or in cooking areas in refuse deposits scattered through the residential neighbourhoods in a way that tells you fish is not an occasional luxury, but a regular part of daily life. Grilled, dried, stored in clay vessels with salt. The river feeds this city as reliably as the fields do. You're not hungry in the way that most ancient peoples were hungry. You're not one bad harvest away from catastrophe, not entirely. The diversity of your food supply, the combination of farmed grain, domesticated animals, river fish, and gathered plant foods, gives your city a stability that single-crop agricultural societies will struggle to achieve for centuries. Your breakfast is simple, but it is enough, and it is varied, and it is good. Now the market. The main market street of Mohenjo-daro is already fully alive by the time you arrive. This is not a quiet place. Vendors have arranged their goods on flat stone surfaces and woven mats. Grain in large jars, dried fish stacked in neat rows, pottery of every size from small drinking cups to the massive storage vessels that hold a household supply of oil or grain for weeks at a time. Livestock move through the crowd with their handlers, adding their particular contributions to the overall noise and smell of the place. You move through it slowly, the way you always do. Not because you have nothing to buy, you do, but because the market is also where you hear what is happening in the city. Who arrived yesterday from the north? Whether the river traders have brought anything new, what the grain situation looks like and whether prices are shifting. You stop at a vendor selling sesame oil, pressed fresh from this season's harvest. You need some. You reach into the small leather pouch at your side and produce a set of weights, small, precise cubes of polished stone in graduated sizes. The vendor produces his own set. You both place them on opposite sides of a simple balance scale. They match. This is so ordinary to you that it barely registers. Of course they match. Weights match in every market, in every city you have ever heard of. A weight is a weight. A measure is a measure. But here is the thing. Those weights, the specific sizes, the specific ratios between them, are identical not just in this market, but in every Indus Valley city across a territory the size of Western Europe. Archaeologists will excavate Mohenjo-daro in the south and Harappa 400 miles to the north and find the same weight system in both places, precise enough that the same set of weights would work in either market without adjustment. Someone decided this. Someone, at some point in this civilization's history, established a standard system of measurement and made sure it was used everywhere. We do not know how they enforced it. No laws have been found, no royal decrees, no administrative records. But the physical evidence is unambiguous. The system existed, it worked, and it held together across hundreds of miles and hundreds of years. Think about what that means for the person standing at this market stall right now. It means you cannot be cheated on measurements. It means the vendor cannot put his thumb on the scale in a way that his weights would not reveal. It means that the same transaction happening at this stall in Mohenjo-daro is happening with the same rules at a stall in Harappa, in Dholavira, in Rakhigarhi, in every Indus Valley city simultaneously. In 2500 BC, a regulated, standardized, honest marketplace, operating across an entire civilization. The modern world spent centuries trying to get this right. International standardized units of measurement were not formally agreed upon globally until the 1800s. And here, 4,000 years earlier, a civilization whose name we do not even know had already figured it out. You finish your transaction and move deeper into the market. The Indus Valley did not trade only within itself. Merchants from Mesopotamia, the civilization of Babylon and Gilgamesh and the first written laws, left records describing trade with a people they called the Meluha. Archaeologists are now confident that Meluha was the Indus Valley. Mesopotamian tablets describe receiving cotton textiles, carnelian beads, ivory and timber from Meluha merchants who arrived by sea. Indus Valley seals, those small carved stones covered in undeciphered script, have been found in Mesopotamian archaeological sites, carried there by traders who made the journey across the Arabian Sea and back. The merchant at the stall selling lapis lazuli beads may have acquired them from a contact who acquired them from someone else, in a chain of hands that stretches back to the mines of Afghanistan. The copper in the tools at the metalworker's stall may have come from Oman. The world of 2500 BC is not isolated or parochial. It is connected, trading, moving goods and ideas across enormous distances in ways that will surprise anyone who imagines ancient peoples as limited to their immediate surroundings. You buy what you came for: sesame oil, a small amount of dried fish, a handful of dates from a vendor who has arranged them with obvious care, the best ones placed on top where the light catches their dark sweetness. You head home through streets that are fuller now, warmer, louder. The city at full morning volume, every stall occupied, every well surrounded by people filling vessels and exchanging the first information of the day. The bread is still warm when you get back, and somewhere across the city, in a workshop you have not yet seen, the day's real work is just beginning. If sleep is pulling at you, follow it. The market will still be running when you return. 5,000 years from now it will still be here, preserved in the earth, waiting patiently for someone to come and look. Rest now. The workshop you're walking toward has been making noise since before you woke up. That is how you know where it is. Not from a sign. There are no signs here, no painted boards announcing what is sold or made inside. You know it from the sound, a rhythmic, patient tapping that has been part of the background noise of your neighborhood for as long as you can remember. Stone on stone, precise, unhurried. The sound of someone who has done this 10,000 times and knows exactly what they are doing. You stop at the entrance. Inside, a man sits cross-legged on a low stone platform, a piece of deep red carnelian in one hand and a drill in the other. The carnelian is roughly the size of your thumb, a hard, semi-precious stone the colour of dried blood, brought here from the mines of Gujarat hundreds of miles to the south. He's drilling a hole through the centre of it, has been drilling for most of the morning, will probably be drilling for most of the afternoon. You watch him for a moment without speaking. There is something almost hypnotic about it. The tiny, incremental progress, the complete stillness of his body except for his hands, the concentration on his face that makes everything else in the room irrelevant. This is a bead maker, and what he is doing is more technically demanding than it looks. Carnelian is one of the hardest stones that can be worked by hand. Drilling a clean hole through the centre of a piece this size, without cracking it, without the hole wandering off centre, requires a drill tip harder than the stone itself, and a pressure so carefully controlled that too much or too little ruins hours of work instantly. Archaeologists studying Indus Valley carnelian beads thousands of years from now will examine them under microscopes and find themselves genuinely puzzled. The drilling technique used to make these beads, the specific tool, the specific method, is not fully understood even with modern analytical equipment. What is understood is the result. Carnelian beads from Mohenjo-daro are found in Mesopotamia. They are found along the Persian Gulf coast. They are found in burial sites of people who lived their entire lives far from the Indus River and never saw the workshop where these objects were made. Someone bought them. Someone traded for them across enormous distances. Someone valued them enough to carry them hundreds of miles and place them in a grave. The man drilling in front of you knows none of this future history. He knows only that his beads are good, that merchants come to buy them, and that the work requires everything he has. Further down the street, a different sound entirely. The potter's workshop announces itself with heat before sound. A wall of warm air rolling out of the open front of the building where two large kilns are running. Inside, 3 people are working at different stages of the same process. One is at the wheel, hands wet, pulling a lump of clay upward into the shape of a storage jar with a particular focused ease of someone doing something their body knows completely. Another is finishing yesterday's work, smoothing the surface of a dozen already shaped vessels with a flat stone tool, adding the simple geometric patterns that appear on Indus Valley pottery so consistently across so many sites that archaeologists recognize them immediately. The third is unloading a finished kiln. Pots come out still warm, stacked carefully, examined one by one. Most are fine. A few have cracked in the firing. Those go into a pile near the door, broken pottery that will eventually be ground up and mixed into new clay, because nothing is wasted here. The scale of pottery production in the Indus Valley is extraordinary. This is not a craftsman making a few pots for his neighbours. This is something closer to early industrial production. Consistent forms, consistent designs, consistent quality, produced in quantities large enough to supply an entire city and export the surplus to trading partners far away. When archaeologists look at Indus Valley pottery across dozens of sites, they see a standardization that suggests not just skill, but organization. Someone coordinated this. Someone decided what the pots should look like and made sure everyone was making them the same way. The same someone, perhaps, who decided what the brick should measure. Every brick in every Indus Valley city is built to the same ratio: 1 unit thick, 2 units wide, 4 units long. Always. Everywhere. In Mohenjo-daro, in Harappa 400 miles north, in Dolavira to the west, in every site archaeologists have excavated across this entire civilization. The bricks are different sizes for different purposes, but they are always in that same ratio: 1 to 2 to 4. Think about what that requires. Not just a decision that was made once, somewhere, by someone, but a system for enforcing it across a territory the size of Western Europe, over a period of centuries, without any written administrative records that have survived, without any evidence of a central government powerful enough to impose its will by force. And yet the bricks match. You walk past a construction site 2 streets over from the potter's workshop. A new house going up, the walls already 3 courses high. The bricklayers work quickly, each brick placed with a precision that comes from years of practice. You pick up a loose brick from the edge of the site and turn it over in your hands. It is heavy, well-fired, perfectly proportioned. Identical to the brick in the wall of your own house. Identical to the brick in the wall of a house in Harappa that you will never visit and have probably never thought about. Someone decided this was how it should be done, and it worked. The metalworker's shop is the loudest place on the street. Bronze tools, copper vessels, gold wire drawn thin enough to weave into jewellery. All of it happening in a small dark space full of heat and the irregular ringing of hammer on metal. The metalworker himself is a compact, precise man who speaks very little. His apprentice, a boy of maybe 12, watches everything with the particular intensity of someone who knows that what he is seeing is going to be required of him soon. This is how all craft knowledge moves in Mohenjo-daro. Not through schools or written manuals, through watching, through being in the room while the person who knows does the thing over and over until your hands begin to understand what your eyes have been seeing. The apprentice will spend years in this workshop before he is trusted with anything important. By the time he is the master, he will have absorbed not just the techniques, but the judgment, the feel for when the metal is at the right temperature, the instinct for how much pressure a particular piece can take before it gives. That knowledge lives in his hands. It will die with him unless he passes it on. But of everything made in this city, of every craft practiced in every workshop on every street, the one that connects most directly to the person lying in a dark room listening to this right now is the simplest, the most taken for granted, the one that requires no mining of precious stones, no mastery of metallurgy, no understanding of kiln temperatures, cotton, woven cotton fabric, produced here in the Indus Valley, almost certainly for the first time anywhere on Earth at scale. The clothes you're wearing right now, not the specific garments, but the material, the fundamental idea of cotton cloth against skin, traces back to here, to these workshops, to these looms, to the farmers outside the city who figured out how to cultivate the cotton plant and the weavers who figured out what to do with it. Before the Indus Valley, most of the world wore wool or linen. Wool is warm but heavy. Linen is light but rough. Cotton is something else, soft, breathable, comfortable against skin in a way that neither wool nor linen can quite match. Once you have worn cotton, everything else feels like a compromise. The t-shirt you're wearing right now, if you're wearing one, is a 5,000-year-old idea. The person who invented it, or the many people across many generations who developed the cultivation and weaving techniques that made it possible, lived here, worked here, walked these same straight streets. They had no idea that one day their innovation would clothe most of the human race. You make your way back through the city in the late morning heat, past the bead maker still drilling, past the potter's workshop still radiating warmth, past the construction site where the new walls are rising one precise brick at a time. Every sound you pass is the sound of someone making something. Every workshop is a repository of knowledge that has taken generations to accumulate and will take generations more to fully develop. None of it is written down. All of it lives in hands and eyes, and the patient relationship between a master and an apprentice who watches and watches until one day, without fanfare, they simply know. This city runs on that knowledge, on the accumulated skill of beadmakers and potters and metalworkers and weavers and brickmakers and merchants who know the trade routes to Mesopotamia well enough to navigate them in both directions. Not on the power of a king, not on the glory of a conquering army, on craft, on patience, on the slow, unglamorous, absolutely essential work of people who are very good at making things. If you are still awake, let the sounds of the workshop fade. The tapping of stone on stone, the hum of the kiln, the ring of hammer on metal. Let them go quiet one by one. The craftsmen will still be here tomorrow. They will be here for another 500 years before the city begins to empty. Rest now. The afternoon is coming, and with it, something the whole city has been moving towards since morning. The heat arrives without warning. One moment the morning is still manageable, warm but moving, the breeze doing its work, the shade of the narrow streets offering enough relief that you can stay comfortable if you keep moving. Then, sometime around midday, the sun clears the last of the morning haze and the city changes. The air thickens. The brick walls that spent all morning absorbing heat begin radiating it back. The street that was busy an hour ago empties out as if someone gave a signal. People peeling away into doorways and courtyards and the cool interiors of thick-walled houses. Mohenjo-daro in the afternoon is a different city from Mohenjo-daro in the morning. But before the heat sent everyone inside, before the market stalls closed and the workshops quieted and the children were pulled in from the street, there was the Great Bath. You've already been here once this morning. Many people come twice. The afternoon visit is different, quieter, more private, the pool, catching the midday light differently than it caught the dawn. You stay a few minutes, then you leave. But here is what most people do not know about cleanliness in Mohenjo-daro. The Great Bath is impressive. It is the showpiece, the thing that appears in every book about the Indus Valley, the structure that makes archaeologists catch their breath when they first see the excavation photographs. But the Great Bath is not what makes this civilization remarkable in terms of sanitation. What makes it remarkable is what is happening in every ordinary house, on every ordinary street. Every home in Mohenjo-daro had a bathroom. Not the Great Bath, a private bathroom, within the house, with a brick floor sloped toward a drain that connected to the city's covered sewer system, running beneath the street outside. Rich houses had them. Modest houses had them. The smallest, most basic residential structures in the lower city had them. Universal access to private sanitation in 2500 BC as a simple, baseline assumption about what a house should contain. Rome's famous sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, still functioning today, still celebrated as one of the great engineering achievements of the ancient world, was built around 600 BC. 2,000 years after Mohenjo-daro's drainage network was already running under every street. Medieval European cities, inheritors of Rome's engineering legacy, still had open sewage channels running through their streets well into the 1400s AD. London's Thames was essentially an open sewer until the 19th century, and the smell during hot summers became so overwhelming that Parliament had to suspend its sessions. Mohenjo-daro solved this problem in 2500 BC. Not for the wealthy, not for the citadel, for everyone, for the city as a whole, as a matter of basic civic organisation, the same way the wells were for everyone, the same way the straight roads were for everyone. The infrastructure of this civilization was built on the assumption that ordinary people deserved it. That assumption would not become standard again for a very long time. By early afternoon, the city is quiet in a way that feels almost deliberate. The workshops have slowed. The market vendors are resting in the shade of their stalls, not really selling, just present. The streets that were busy this morning are empty except for the occasional person moving quickly from one patch of shade to the next. This is not laziness. This is adaptation. You do not fight the afternoon heat in a city without air conditioning. You work around it, compress the active hours into morning and evening, and treat the middle of the day as something to be survived rather than used. The children have other ideas. They always do. Heat that drives adults inside seems to have the opposite effect on children, who treat the empty afternoon streets as their personal territory. You can hear them from inside the house, the particular sound of children playing without adult supervision, which has not changed in 5,000 years and probably will not change in another 5,000. Running feet on brick, an argument that escalates and then resolves without intervention. Laughter. They're playing with toys. Archaeologists excavating Indus Valley sites find them everywhere. Small clay animal figurines, rattles, whistles shaped like birds, and most remarkably, tiny clay carts with wheels. Not decorative wheels, not wheels that are part of a fixed sculpture. Actual rotating wheels on actual axles, so that the cart can be pulled along a surface and the wheels turn. Pull-along toys in 2500 BC, functionally identical to the wooden pull-along toys still sold in children's shops today. A child in Mohenjo-daro dragged a small clay cart along a brick floor 4,500 years ago. The wheels turned. The child was delighted. This is not speculation. The toys exist. They have been held by archaeologists who turned the wheels with their fingers and understood immediately what they were looking at. Some things do not need to evolve because they were already correct the first time. The children are not the only ones who left something behind. Somewhere in this city, perhaps in a workshop not unlike the ones you passed this morning, someone cast a small bronze figure of a girl. She stands 10 centimeters tall, one hand on her hip, her head tilted slightly, wearing nothing but bangles stacked up her left arm. She looks like she just stopped dancing and is waiting for the music to start again. Archaeologists will find her 4,000 years from now and name her the Dancing Girl. They will study her for decades. They will argue about what she meant, who she was, whether she was a dancer or a deity, or simply someone's idea of beauty captured in metal. Nobody will agree. But everyone who sees her will understand immediately that whoever made her was not just making an object. They were making a person. In a quiet room on the upper floor of a building near the citadel, something sits that will puzzle the world for a century. A small stone statue, barely 20 centimeters tall, of a figure that archaeologists will eventually call the priest king. He wears a robe, decorated with trefoil patterns. His eyes are half closed, directed slightly downward, in an expression that reads as either meditative or authoritative, depending on how long you look at it. His bearing is composed, certain. The sculpture is technically accomplished in a way that suggests the person who made it was depicting someone important, someone whose image was worth the considerable effort of working this carefully in stone. Who is he? Nobody knows. There is no inscription identifying him, no other images that clearly depict the same figure, no surviving texts that mention a leader or priest or king whose description matches. He may be a ruler, he may be a priest, he may be a deity, he may be a specific individual whose name was known to everyone in this city and has been completely lost to time. He sits in the Karachi Museum now, 4,000 years from the hands that made him, still wearing that same composed expression. Still not saying anything, the Indus Valley keeps its secrets with extraordinary consistency. The afternoon heat is the right time to let your mind go quiet. Let the sounds of the city fade, the distant children, the slow creak of a cart somewhere, the water moving under the street. If sleep is close, go with it. The evening is still ahead, and the city has more to show you, but it will wait. It has been waiting for 4,000 years. You have walked these streets all day. You have eaten their food, visited their bath, watched their craftsmen work, heard their children play. You know what their bread smelled like and how their drainage channels ran and what ratio their bricks were cut to. You can picture the morning market and the afternoon heat and the bronze dancing girl standing with one hand on her hip somewhere in this city. And yet, there is a wall you cannot get past. A silence at the center of everything you have seen today that does not yield no matter how carefully you look. You can describe the streets of Mohenjo-daro in precise detail. You can reconstruct a meal, a morning, a working day. But you cannot hear a single word anyone here ever said. You cannot read one sentence they ever wrote. You do not know what they called this city, what they called themselves, what they believed happened after death, or what name they gave to whatever forces they thought governed the world. The Indus Valley. Civilization is the most legible ancient culture you cannot actually read. Start with what is not here. Walk through every excavated site from Mohenjo-daro in the south to Harappa in the north. Walk through Dolavira, through Rakhigarhi, through the dozens of smaller towns and outposts that made up this civilization's territory. Look carefully at everything archaeologists have pulled from the earth. Every artifact, every structure, every fragment of bone and pottery and worked stone. You will not find a single large weapon designed to kill people. No swords, no battle axes, no spears built for war rather than hunting, no shields, no armor, nothing that looks like it was made for organized violence between human groups. In a major ancient civilization spanning centuries and millions of people, the complete absence of military weaponry is so unusual that archaeologists spent decades assuming they simply had not found it yet. Surely it was there somewhere. Surely a civilization this. Large had armies, had wars, had the instruments of conquest that every other major ancient culture left behind in abundance. But it was not there. It is still not there. The absence is real. And it does not stop at weapons. Look at the walls of Egyptian tombs and you see battles, kings standing triumphant over rows of defeated enemies, prisoners with their hands bound, the iconography of military power repeated endlessly, because military power was the foundation of political legitimacy in Egypt. Look at Mesopotamian art and you see the same thing. Conquest, domination, the defeated rendered small beneath the feet of the victorious. Look at Indus Valley art and you see animals. You see figures that might be deities. You see the careful geometric patterns on pottery, the precise symbols on seals. You do not see a single depiction of battle, not one image of a king defeating an enemy, not one scene of conquest or subjugation or the exercise of military force. Either this civilization was extraordinarily peaceful, or it expressed power in ways so different from every other ancient culture that we do not recognize them when we see them. We do not know which. Now look at the buildings. Every major ancient civilization announced its power through architecture. Egypt built pyramids and massive temple complexes that could be seen for miles, monuments to gods and pharaohs that dwarfed everything around them and were meant to. Mesopotamia built ziggurats, stepped temple towers rising above the flat plain, visible from every direction, impossible to ignore. Rome built forums and colosseums and triumphal arches that said, in stone, louder than any words, "We are powerful, we are organized, we are in charge." Walk through Mohenjo-daro and look for the building that says this. It is not there. The largest structures in the city are the Great Bath and what appears to be a large granary, a place for storing food for the community. Public infrastructure, shared resources. There is no palace that dwarfs the houses around it. No temple complex occupying an entire quarter of the city. No monument built to celebrate the glory of a single individual or a single god. The citadel mound is elevated, yes, and the buildings on it are more substantial than those below. But the difference in scale between the grandest building in Mohenjo-daro and the most modest house is far smaller than in any comparable ancient civilization. Everyone's house, as you have already seen today, was built to a similar standard. The wealthy had more rooms, the poor had fewer. But the floor of every house was brick. The walls of every house were fired and kiln-hardened. Every house had a bathroom. Every house drained into the same city-wide system. The infrastructure did not stop at the edge of the wealthy neighborhood and become dirt roads and open ditches on the other side. It continued, all the way through. Think about how radical that is. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh lived in a palace of stone while most people lived in mud. In Mesopotamia, the ziggurat rose above everything else, as a permanent visual reminder of who was closer to the gods and who was not. The entire architecture of those civilizations was designed to communicate hierarchy, to make sure that when you looked up from wherever you stood, you could see exactly where power lived and understood your own distance from it. In Mohenjo-daro, you could look up and you see the citadel mound, but the building at the top was a bath, open to the city, fed by the same water system that ran through your neighborhood. No one built a monument to themselves here. No one commissioned a statue 20 meters tall to remind the population who was in charge. The largest investment this civilization made, in stone, in engineering, in the labor of thousands of people over generations, was in drainage, in wells, in the infrastructure of ordinary life. We do not know if this was ideology or simply practicality. We do not know if the people of Mohenjo-daro believed in equality as a principle or simply organized themselves efficiently. But the physical record says something that is hard to argue with. In this city, the gap between the person at the top and the person at the bottom was smaller than almost anywhere else in the ancient world. And that gap expressed itself not in monuments, but in the quality of the bricks. No one built a pyramid here. No one needed everyone else to look up. And then there is the writing. You have seen the seals today, small carved stones that merchants and traders used to mark their goods, pressed into clay to leave an impression, the way a signet ring leaves an impression in wax. Every seal carries symbols, clean, precise, deliberately arranged symbols from a script of over 400 distinct characters, found consistently across thousands of artifacts and dozens of sites. This is a real writing system. Functional, widespread, used for commerce and administration across an entire civilization for centuries. It carried the thoughts and transactions and records of 5 million people, and no living person can read it. Every attempt to decode the Indus script has failed or remains so contested that no interpretation has gained general acceptance. The language underneath it cannot be identified with certainty. Every analytical technique available to modern linguistics has been applied. Computers have analyzed the symbol, frequencies and sequences. Scholars have compared it to every known ancient script. Nothing has cracked it. We have the writing of an entire civilization and it tells us nothing. Think about what lives inside that silence. The name of the person who designed the drainage system you walked over this morning. The prayer spoken at the edge of the Great Bath. The story told to children about where the world came from and what happens when you die. The name of the dancing girl. The name of the priest king. The word they used for the river that gave them everything. All of it is in those symbols, locked away behind a door that 4,000 years of silence has sealed so completely that we cannot even find the keyhole. You are still in this city, still walking these straight streets in the late afternoon light. You know so much about this place, and you know almost nothing. That is the particular vertigo of the Indus Valley, the way it gives you just enough to feel the presence of the people who lived here, and then withholds the one thing that would make them fully real. Their voices, their words, the sound of their language in the morning air. They were here. They built all of this. They walked where you are walking right now. And they are more silent than any civilization has a right to be. The evening is coming. The light is changing. Somewhere in the city a fire is being lit for the first time since morning, and the smell of cooking is beginning to move through the streets again. Life continues, the way it always does, even in the shadow of unanswerable questions. This is the right moment to let the questions go. You do not need to solve the mystery tonight. Nobody has solved it in 4,000 years. It will keep until morning. Let the silence of the Indus Valley be what it is, not an absence, but a kind of presence. The presence of people who were here, completely and fully, and left everything except their words. Rest now. The evening is waiting. The light changes first. You notice it the way you notice it every evening. Not a sudden shift, but a gradual one. The quality of the sun moving from the flat white heat of afternoon into something warmer, more golden. The kind of light that makes the brick walls of Mohenjo-daro glow in a way they do not glow at any other time of day. The shadows that were sharp and short at noon are long now, stretching across the streets in soft diagonals, and the air, still warm but no longer brutal, has begun its slow return toward the coolness that will come with full dark. The city reads this change and responds to it. Merchants who spent the hottest hours resting in the shade of their stalls are packing up now, folding woven mats, transferring unsold grain back into storage jars, stacking pottery carefully for tomorrow. The market that was loud this morning and quiet this afternoon is finding a third mode. The particular sound of a place winding down, the last transactions of the day, voices lowered, movements unhurried. Nobody is rushing. The day is almost done and everyone knows it. From the fields outside the city walls, the farmers are coming home. You can see them from the street. Small figures at first, growing larger as they approach the city gates, carrying tools, leading animals, moving with the particular tiredness of people who have spent the day doing physical work in the sun and are now within sight of food and rest. They bring information with them the way people always do when they have been outside the city while the city has been busy inside itself. How the crops are looking, whether the river level has shifted, what the weather might be doing in the days ahead. By the time the last of them are through the gates, the market is nearly empty, and the streets are filling again with a different kind of traffic. People heading home, children being called in, the smell of cooking beginning to drift from a dozen directions at once. Your kitchen is alive in a way it was not this morning. The clay stove that held a low fire for the flatbread at breakfast is burning properly now, fed with enough fuel to do the longer work of the evening meal. Someone, the older woman again, the one whose hands know this kitchen better than anyone, has a clay pot of lentils going, seasoned with mustard seed and sesame oil. The smell of it filling the room and drifting out through the window into the street, where it mixes with the same smell coming from every other kitchen on the block. This is the communal smell of evening in Mohenjo-daro. Lentils and flatbread, and the particular savoury warmth of sesame oil heating in clay. It is the smell that means the day is finishing and something better is beginning. The part of the day when the work stops and the people come back together. Your household assembles the way it does every evening. Children first, loud and hungry, needing to be managed before anything else happens. Then the adults, one by one, finding their places in the room, sitting on mats, leaning against walls, the particular arrangements that happen naturally when a group of people have been sharing a space long enough that everyone knows where they belong without being told. Food is distributed without ceremony, not formally, not according to a rigid hierarchy, but not randomly either. Children are fed first or fed simultaneously with adults, the priority being that small bodies get what they need before anyone starts thinking about portions. The older woman eats less than she probably should, and nobody mentions it because everyone has noticed and nobody knows what to say. This is the social texture of a household, the same in 2500 BC as it is anywhere else in human history. The small negotiations of care and priority that happen around food without ever quite becoming explicit. The meal is simple, and it is enough. It has been enough every evening for as long as anyone in this household can. Remember, after the eating comes the part of the evening that has no name but everyone understands. The time when the day's business is finished and the night's sleep has not yet arrived, and the space between them belongs to whatever the group decides to fill it with. Tonight, someone brings out a clay rattle, a small hollow vessel with dried seeds inside, shaped to fit comfortably in a hand. Archaeologists will find instruments like this in Indus Valley sites across the entire civilization, along with clay whistles shaped like birds and small drums whose frames have long since rotted away, but whose clay components survive. There may have been flutes as well. The same impulse toward music that put bone flutes in Paleolithic caves 40,000 years ago does not disappear in a civilization this sophisticated. It finds new materials, new forms, new contexts. Someone begins to shake the rattle in a simple rhythm. A child immediately tries to copy it by clapping. Someone else taps a hand against the floor. The rhythm passes around the room, picked up and modified and passed on again, and for a few minutes the kitchen is full of a sound that is somewhere between music and play, and something that has no modern category at all. This is how the evening moves. Music gives way to talking. Talking gives way to the particular kind of talking that happens when the fire is low and the children are getting heavy-eyed. Storytelling. Not performance exactly. Not one person standing up to address an audience, but the more intimate kind. One voice in a room of people who are half listening and half drifting. A story that is partly remembered and partly invented in the telling. What stories did they tell? Nobody knows. The script that might have recorded them cannot be read. The oral traditions that carried them forward did not survive the civilization's disappearance, but the stories were there. They had to be, because stories are how knowledge moves in a world without writing, how the important things get remembered and passed to the next generation, dressed up as entertainment so that children absorb them without knowing they are being taught. Which plants near the river are safe to eat and which are not. Where the water goes, bad in dry years. What the sky looks like before the kind of storm that requires moving to higher ground. All of it is in the stories, wrapped in characters and events that make it memorable, that give it the emotional weight that pure information never has. The children do not know they are being educated. They think they are being told a story before sleep. They are right. Both things are true at once. One by one the children go under. It happens the way it always happens. Gradually, then completely. First the youngest, already asleep against someone's side without anyone noticing the exact moment it happened. Then the next, fighting it with the particular futile determination of children who do not want to miss anything. eyes closing and opening and closing again until finally they stay closed. The older ones last longer, but not as long as they think. The adults lower their voices without discussing it. The rattle goes quiet. The storyteller brings the story to a close. Not a dramatic ending, just a trailing off. The way stories end when the audience is mostly asleep anyway. The city outside has gone quiet too. Not silent. Cities are never fully silent, not even at night, but quieter. The market is dark. The workshops are closed. The wells stand unattended. Somewhere someone is keeping watch. A city this organised, a city that standardised its bricks and regulated its weights, and ran drainage channels under every street, did not leave its nights to chance. The granaries that fed everyone through lean seasons needed guarding. The wells needed protecting. The gates that separated the city from the dark open plain beyond needed eyes. We do not know exactly how they arranged this. No written guard rotations survive. No inscriptions describe a night watch or a city patrol. But the physical evidence hints at the answer. The Citadel Mound, elevated, central, with clear sightlines over the lower city in every direction, was almost certainly occupied through the night by someone whose job was to watch. The narrow lanes between residential blocks, designed just wide enough for two people to pass, were also easy to monitor. A city built on a grid has fewer places for trouble to hide than a city that grew without a plan. And there were the fires, kept burning through the night in kitchens and courtyards, their light spilling out through windows and doorways, making the streets just bright enough that movement in them would be visible to anyone paying attention. Fire as infrastructure. Fire as security. The same fire that cooked the evening meal and warmed the sleeping household also told anyone watching from the Citadel that this street, this block, this neighbourhood was alive and occupied and not to be disturbed. It was not a police force. It was something older and in some ways more effective. A community organised well enough that the city itself became its own protection. You go to the roof one last time. The city below you is a pattern of darkness and the occasional small light. Fires through windows, a torch at a corner somewhere, the faint glow of embers in a kitchen that has not quite gone cold. And above all of it, above the straight streets and the brick walls and the great bath and the granary and the workshops and the wells, the sky. There is no light pollution in 2500 BC, no street lamps, no illuminated signs, no glow from neighbouring cities visible on the horizon. The sky over Mohenjo-daro at night is the sky as it was made, completely, overwhelmingly full of stars. The Milky Way not as a faint suggestion, but as a solid band of light stretching from one horizon to the other, so bright it casts a shadow. Individual stars sharp and steady. Planets moving slowly against the fixed background of constellations that have been watched and named and given stories by people standing on rooftops just like this one, all over this city for generations. You stand there for a while, not thinking about anything in particular, just looking up at the same sky that is looking down at someone in a dark room somewhere in the world right now, 4,500 years from this moment, listening to a quiet voice describe what you are seeing. The stars do not know about the distance between you. Neither, in this moment, do you. The city is quiet now. The fires are low. The children are asleep. If you're still awake, you do not need to be. Let the stars over Mohenjo-daro be the last thing. That vast, unhurried sky that has been watching this city since before the first brick was laid, and will still be there long after the last one has crumbled back into. Earth, rest now. The last chapter is waiting for you whenever you're ready. Nothing dramatic happened. That is the hardest part to accept about the end of the Indus Valley civilization. The part that does not fit the stories we tell about how great things end. There was no invasion, No conquering army appeared at the gates of Mohenjo-daro with fire and weapons. No earthquake swallowed the city. No flood wiped it from the map in a single catastrophic moment. No plague moved through the streets and left them empty overnight. The city you have walked through today, the straight streets, the great bath, the workshops, the wells, the rooftop where you stood and looked at the stars, did not end with a bang. It ended with a whisper, spread across centuries, so slow that the people living through it probably did not know it was happening until it was already done. It begins with the sky. Around 1900 BC, something shifts in the pattern of the monsoons. Those seasonal rains that the entire agricultural system of the Indus Valley depends on completely. The rains that come every year, that fill the river, that flood the fields in the controlled way that makes the soil so extraordinarily fertile, that make it possible to feed 5 million people from this land. Those rains begin to change, not all at once, not dramatically, just slightly less reliable than they were before, slightly less predictable. A season here that is drier than it should be. A year there where the floods do not come at the right time or come too hard or not at all. The rivers shift too. The Gagga-Hakra River, a major waterway that supported dozens of Indus Valley settlements along its banks, begins to dry up. Whether this is connected to the monsoon changes or to tectonic shifts in the land itself, geologists still debate. What is not debated is the result. A river that was once wide enough and reliable enough to support a string of prosperous towns along its length becomes seasonal, then intermittent, then gone. The farms that depended on it fail, the towns along its banks empty out, and so it begins. Not a collapse, a migration. Families who have lived in the same houses on the same streets for generations look at their fields and their drying wells and their shrinking river and make the same calculation that people have always made when the land stops providing. They leave, not in panic, not as refugees fleeing a disaster, just quietly, practically, the way people move when staying no longer makes sense. They go east, toward the Ganges plain where the rains are still reliable, where the rivers still run full, where the land can still be farmed. They take what they can carry. They leave behind what they cannot. The brick houses, the drainage channels, the wells, the pottery they could not fit in the cart, the seals they had no use for on the road. Picture what this looks like from inside a single family. One season the neighbourhood is full. The market is running. The workshops are open. The wells are attended. The next season a few families on the next street have gone. Moved east, someone says, following the Sharma family who left 2 years ago. The season after that more houses are empty. The market has fewer vendors. Some of the workshops have closed. The city is still functioning, but it is quieter than it was, and everyone can feel the difference even if nobody says it directly. This goes on for generations. The population does not crash. It drains. Slowly, steadily, family by family, neighbourhood by neighbourhood. The city empties the way a fire dies when no one tends it. Not all at once, but ember by ember, until one morning the warmth is simply gone. Somewhere in this long, slow leaving, the last person who could read the script dies. This is the moment, unwitnessed, unrecorded, probably unremarkable to everyone around it, when the silence becomes permanent. Because languages can survive the death of a civilization if someone writes them down in a way that can be decoded later. Egyptian hieroglyphics survived because the Rosetta Stone gave linguists a key. Mesopotamian cuneiform survived because enough parallel texts existed to crack the code. The Indus script had no Rosetta Stone, no parallel text in a known language, no inscription that said the same thing in 2 different scripts. When the last literate person died, when the last person who had learned to read those 400 symbols from someone who had learned from someone else, in an unbroken chain stretching back to whoever invented the script in the first place. The chain broke, and 4,000 years of silence began. The cities do not vanish immediately, they fade. Mohenjo-daro in its final years is a smaller, quieter version of itself. The great civic infrastructure, the drainage channels, the wells, the great bath, still exists but is less carefully maintained than it once was. Fewer hands to tend it, fewer people who remember why it matters. The standardized brick ratios that held across an entire civilization begin to loosen as the civilization itself loosens. Late period bricks at some sites show less consistency than earlier ones, as if the system that enforced the standard has relaxed its grip. Eventually the last residents leave. The fires go out, the wells stand unattended. The great bath holds its water for a while, that careful waterproofing doing its job long after the last person has stepped down into it, and then slowly, over years, fills with silt and debris and the patient accumulation of time. The city sleeps. For 3,500 years, nobody knows it is there. Other civilizations rise and fall above it and around it. Empires are built and destroyed. Religions are born. Languages evolve and die and give birth to new ones. The world changes so completely that nothing visible on the surface connects back to what lies beneath it. Until 1920, when a British archaeologist named John Marshall, investigating a series of unusually well-made ancient bricks that local workers have been using as ballast in the construction of a railway line in what is now Pakistan, begins to dig and finds a city, a real city, with straight streets and brick houses and a public bath and drainage channels and thousands of small carved seals covered in symbols nobody has ever seen before. A civilization of 5 million people with planned cities and indoor plumbing and cotton clothing and standardized weights and the most advanced sanitation system of the ancient world. Forgotten so completely that we had to rediscover them by accident. By tripping over their bricks, you're standing on the rooftop of a house in Mohenjo-daro. The stars are out, the city is quiet beneath you. Somewhere to the east, centuries from now, your descendants will be building new lives along the banks of a different river, carrying fragments of this culture forward in ways that will be debated by scholars for generations. But you do not know that yet. Tonight the city is still here. The fires are still burning in the kitchens below. The great bath is still full. The wells are still attended. Tonight it is enough. Let that be where we leave it. Not with the ending, with the night before the ending, when the city was still whole, and the stars were out, and the fires were lit, and the children were asleep. That city existed. Those people were real. They built something extraordinary and lived in it fully and then faded so quietly that the world forgot them for 3,500 years. And now you know they were here. Rest now. The outro is just ahead, but only when you're ready. There is no hurry. The city of Mohenjo-daro has been waiting 4,000 years. It can wait a little longer. You're still here. Maybe you've been listening since the beginning. Since that first morning in Mohenjo-daro, the smell of bread baking, the sound of cartwheels on brick, the water running clean beneath the streets. Maybe you're just now finding the edges of sleep, that soft borderland where the voice you're hearing starts to blur with whatever your mind is beginning to dream. Wherever you are, stay there, because before the silence comes, there are a few things worth knowing about what this civilization left behind. Not the ruins, not the artifacts in the museums, the things they left inside the life you're living right now, tonight, without knowing it. You're wearing cotton. Maybe not right now. Maybe it is wool or synthetic or nothing at all. But at some point today you wore cotton, a shirt, a pair of socks, a pillowcase your cheek is resting on right now. Cotton so ordinary, so completely taken for granted, that it would never occur to you to wonder where it came from. It came from here, from the Indus Valley, from farmers who figured out how to cultivate the cotton plant and weavers who figured out what to do with it, in a civilization that has been silent for 4,000 years. The softness of cotton against skin, that specific comfort, that breathability, that particular way it feels different from wool or linen, was discovered by people whose names we cannot read, in a language we cannot decode, in cities we only found by accident 100 years ago. Every time you pull on a cotton shirt, you're wearing a 5,000-year-old idea. You use standardized measurements. When a recipe tells you to use 2 cups of flour, when a doctor tells you your temperature is 98.6, when a package tells you it weighs 500 grams, you're operating inside a system of standardized units that makes it possible for people across enormous distances to exchange goods and information without cheating each other or talking past each other. The Indus Valley had this. Identical weights found in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, 400 miles apart, precise enough to use in either market without adjustment. The specific system did not survive. The units changed, the measurements evolved. But the idea, the foundational understanding that honest exchange requires agreed-upon standards, that a weight is a weight and a measure is a measure, and everyone should be using the same one. That idea is still running underneath every transaction happening anywhere in the world tonight. They figured this out in 2500 BC. And somewhere in South Asia, in India, in Pakistan, in the populations that trace their ancestry to this river valley, millions of people carry genetic material from the citizens of Mohenjo-daro, not as a historical curiosity, as a living biological fact. The people of the Indus Valley did not vanish. They migrated. They mixed with other populations. They had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren in an unbroken line that leads to people alive today. People who do not know and cannot know that they carry this particular ancestry because the civilization that produced it left no readable records and no surviving cultural memory. The people are gone. The genes are not. And yet, we cannot read a single word they wrote. Everything else, the cotton, the measurements, the genetic legacy, all of it passed forward without language, carried in objects and bodies rather than words. But the words themselves, the actual thoughts of 5 million people across centuries of civilization, the prayers and the stories and the names and the arguments and the love letters and the records and whatever it was they believed about the sky and the river and what happens after death. All of it is locked inside 400 symbols that no living person can read. That silence is the thing that stays with you. Long after the facts have faded, long after the specific details of bead making and drainage channels and brick ratios have blurred into sleep, the silence remains. The presence of people who were completely here and are now completely gone except for the shape of the holes they left behind. Somewhere in the ruins of Mohenjo-daro, under 20 feet of earth in modern Pakistan, the bricks of those houses still hold their shape. The drainage channels still run in straight lines beneath streets that no one has walked for 3,000 years. The wells are still there, still perfectly constructed, still waiting. The steps of the great bath still intact, worn smooth in the centre from the weight of 10,000 mornings, leading down into a pool that has been empty for longer than most civilizations have existed. Everything is still there, everything except the people and their words. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, that city is still standing in the dark, silent, patient, the bricks holding their shape the way they have always held their shape, 1 to 2 to 4, the same ratio, the same care, the same anonymous craftsmanship that built something meant to last and succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. They did not know we would find them. They did not know we would lie awake 4,000 years later, wondering who they were. But here we are, and now, at least, you know they were here, If you have made it this far, thank you for spending this night in Mohenjo-daro. Before you go, leave a comment and tell us where in the world you're listening from right now. Someone in Karachi, just a few hours from where these streets still lie under the earth. Someone in New York at midnight. Someone in London in the early morning. Someone in Mumbai, carrying ancestry from this valley without knowing it. Wherever you are part of this circle. All of us drifting off to the same story about people who built something extraordinary and then disappeared so quietly that the world forgot them for 3,000 years. If you want to walk through more lost corners of history like this one, subscribe so you do not miss the next journey. And if this channel has given you something, a few hours of quiet, a story worth sleeping on, a civilization worth remembering, consider joining as a member. It helps us keep making these long, slow explorations. But for now, you do not need to do anything at all. The city is behind you, the stars are out, the fires are low. Sleep,